August 10th, 2023. Can I get a roll call, please?
All right. Member Joyce Davis.
Here.
Member Satish Chandra.
Here.
Member Shirag Kumar Patel.
Here.
Member Christine Coulterman.
Here.
Member Daniel Huynh.
Here.
Member Jeff Houston.
Here.
Member Kusta Sini. Here.
Great. So let me do a few introductions. This is Assistant City Attorney Liz Klotz. She will be supporting us tonight, and going forward, she'll be joined with the City Attorney Glenn Govins, who is actually out of the office this week. This is Fiona Kirby. She will be the staff liaison to the committee in supporting me, and this is Michelle Estevio from the City Clerk's office. So welcome to the 2023 Charter Review Committee. Meeting agendas are posted to the city's meeting page in advance of the meeting. Presentations will be available on the city's meeting page as post-agenda materials at www.santaclara.legistar.com.
So this meeting will be recorded. The Zoom application will notify you that this meeting is being recorded. Please press continue on the Zoom application to stay in the meeting. Use the raise your hand feature in Zoom when you'd like to speak on an item, and to also lower your hand when you're finished speaking. Please unmute when called to speak and mute yourself when you are done speaking. If you're calling in by phone, identify yourself by name before speaking on an item. Press *9 on your phone to raise and lower your hand, and press *6 if you are participating by phone to unmute.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is public presentations. This part of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the 2023 Charter Review Committee on any matter not on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city or authorities. The law does not permit action on or extended discussion of any item not on the agenda except under special circumstances. The governing body or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed, and the committee may request staff to report back at a subsequent meeting. As a reminder, comments can be mailed to the clerk at santaclaraca.gov. If any member of the public would like to make comments, please raise your hand in Zoom. Do we have any members of the public that would like to speak? We have one.
Lee, you may speak.
This is Lee Broffin. I am calling in to say, what is the emergency of this item? Why wasn't it on the agenda for the November election of last year? And what's the emergency now? I don't understand why we're going to spend almost $500,000 on something that was elected on the election for the chief of police, and almost 32,000 people voted to keep him. So I'm not sure why you're doing this, and I think you need to examine it too.
Thank you, Lee. Do we have any other comments? Any other speakers? Okay. If you could identify yourself, please.
Green light. All right. Longtime resident. My parents bought the place in '63. Been here a long time. Self-employed. Very pragmatic. So when I heard the talk about trying to get the right for us not to have the right to vote for a police chief, it made absolutely no sense to me. In 60 years, I've never heard one resident say, "Darn, I really want to have somebody else appoint my police chief for us." Never once. And at $600,000, it's not $500,000. It's $500,000 plus city workers' cost. Why? Where is that money coming from? I've been here meeting after meeting, hearing people pleading for money for the historic swim center. No money. Suddenly now we're going to find $600,000 to throw at something that nobody else in the city wants, but maybe a few people. And you have to ask why. Why would they want that now? And I'm telling you right now, as a resident, if it goes to vote and $600,000 is wasted, it's going to be a real big storm. Let's put that money to somewhere in the city that we can actually use it. If the money's there, let's shovel it off to the swim center. Again, I'm pragmatic. I'm not going to waste money. I'm self-employed. Thank you. I'm Bert Field, okay?
Hello, my name is Howard Gibbons. I'm also known as the Hot Dog Dude. I own a hot dog stand out at the Santa Clara Great America Station. I'm very active inside city politics here because I've been devastated by different issues. If any of you watched or been here, you know who I am, what I'm about. And 10 years ago, I was robbed at gunpoint by 3 youths. And after going through that experience, I'm still haunted today to have a sawed-off gun thrown into my stomach. And I think of the police, and I've listened to different people who want to eliminate that position. And the only reason why they want to eliminate it is political. You know, I like the idea of a cop coming up from the streets of Santa Clara, not coming in from Idaho or some other place picked by, 6 or 7 people who get to say, oh, this is who's going to protect our city. I like the idea. You work your way up, you get to know everybody, the community knows you, and then they get to vote for you. And then that person is obligated to those voters, not to 5 or 6 politicians, or they want to put one person to hire the chief of police. It's really great that this is the last city in the state of California that the voters get to pick who is their top cop. And if you guys decide to take that away from those voters, you're putting them at risk. You're endangering them because the top cop knows every cop that works here. He knows every citizen. I do events throughout the city, and I see, the people interacting with him, the ones before. So, think twice. And there is a thing about spending $500,000. I'm also the guy who always has nothing to do with the swim center, but I always say, let the kids swim. Spend that money over there, but really,
Thank you, Howard.
don't take that right away from the voters. They really need it. Thank you.
Next speaker?
Good evening. My name is Pilar Furlong. I am a 50-plus year resident of the city of Santa Clara. Very proud and very happy to be in this city. The times that I have had to interact with our police department, they've been very supportive of me, and I am very supportive of them. I believe pretty strongly that we should be able to elect our police chief, and that they should be a resident of the city of Santa Clara. We elect our officials, our council. We just went through a very large process of making sure that they were representative of our community. I want our police chief to be representative of our community also. I want to see that person be a resident of Santa Clara, and I feel strongly that we should have a say and that we should get to vote and have some input onto who that person is that guides the police force that is supporting us. So thank you. I don't say that.
Thank you, Ms. Furlong.
Good evening. My name is Preston Metcalf. I'm a lifelong resident of Santa Clara. I grew up here, Santa Clara High, Mission College, Santa Clara University, and currently I'm the executive director of the Triton Museum of Art right across the street, one of those streets. And I'm here to request that you seriously consider keeping the position of police chief as an elected position. It stimulates confidence in the police force, knowing that he represents us and does not have to answer to any political pull from one direction or another. Now, the financial concerns have been raised. The idea of having local representation have been raised, and I'd like to present or propose that we consider also the macro view. We are in a time when trust in the police departments across the country has fallen by the wayside. We see what happens when that kind of confidence is lost. We need to maintain that trust. And the best way, in my opinion, of maintaining that trust is to make sure that the elected police chief is one of our community. That's the best way we can ensure continued safety. Now, the argument is that we're the only city in California that has an elected police chief. We're the only city in California that's continuing to do it right. And my evidence is that we have one of the finest police forces in the state. Let's not jeopardize that. Thank you.
Thank you, Preston. Any other speakers?
Nancy Biagini.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can, Nancy, thank you.
All right. I feel very strongly about this issue. I'm born and raised in Santa Clara and I'm still here and I'm 70 years old. We have not had any problems electing our police chief. I really want to strongly recommend we continue that. And here's why. In my career, I spent over 40 years working in human rights and legislative and political issues. And I can tell you that more than one national study that I've looked at, considering the fact that there's a lot of question about police behavior now, all the human rights commissions I ever worked with, heard from, or was involved with unanimously say the best way to reform a police or law enforcement movement is to elect your police chief. It's that simple. I am also aware in different parts of the country now, there are cities looking at changing their charter so they can elect a police chief. Otherwise, you leave it up to politics. Who got elected? I'm not going to get into that big conversation about big money and politics, but let people vote. It has worked. Folks talk about, gee, we don't have enough of a pool of candidates that are qualified. Yes, we do. We always have. Nothing's changed. And quite frankly, some of the problems in my career of dealing in human rights were because people came in from out of state even. People that were born and raised in Santa Clara understand Santa Clara. Santa Clara is not San Jose. Santa Clara is not LA. Santa Clara is not San Francisco. Santa Clara is not out of state. If you're in this city, you understand it better. And I can tell you from law enforcement that I've talked to in Nevada, in Santa Clara, in San Jose, and in Oakland, to a person, if they could
Nancy,
change
your
get
time
into
is up.
Santa Clara, they would. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Do we have any other speakers? Can you
Good evening. My name is Dana Caldwell. I am a 43-year resident of Santa Clara. I'm also the chairman of the Parks and Rec Commission. I have a passion for this city. I know a lot of people in this city, and for most of my adult life here, I've never once heard anybody say, geez, our system doesn't work with an elected police chief or an elected city clerk. In fact, I really like the fact that I have the opportunity to choose my elected police chief. He's accountable to us. I think it works. I don't see why we would want to change it. I have a few ideas on why we want to change it, but I don't think there's a reason to change it. Personally, I think it's a waste of our funds when we have much more pressing issues in this city that need to be addressed with infrastructure and other things. Just my 2 cents. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. We will move to the general business items on the agenda at this point. Our first item is the presentation on the roles and responsibilities of the 2023 Charter Review Committee. Assistant City Attorney Liz Klotz and I will provide the presentation, and Liz will begin. If we can get the PowerPoint, please.
Good evening, committee. I first want to thank you and commend you for taking the time to volunteer and serve on this, on the charter review. I know it's a lot of your time and commitment for over the next couple months. Today, Cynthia and I are going to be providing you an overview of the Brown Act, Rules of Procedure, Public Records Act, and roles and responsibilities for the committee. Next slide, please. The Brown Act is a state law that was passed in 1953, incorporated into the state constitution in 2004. And it's intended to provide openness and transparency, ensure that the public has meaningful access to its agencies, and to provide the public with a meaningful way to provide input. There are a number of state laws that are aimed at ensuring openness and transparency, the Brown Act, the Public Records Act, the Political Reform Act. And these laws show a desire by the public and an intent by the legislature to ensure that the public gains a meaningful way of participating in our local agency decision-making. Next slide, please. This is a core tenet of the Brown Act to safeguard the public's right to access and participate in government meetings. We want to ensure that deliberations and actions are open and public. We want to provide access, like I said, to the local agency decisions. We also want to make sure that votes are done openly, that there are no secret ballots. So is Santa Clara a local agency? And I think the obvious answer is yes, but is your committee? Under the Brown Act, a legislative body that is a committee or a commission or a board created by the city council is also considered a legislative body, and thus your charter review committee is also a legislative body and subject to the Brown Act. Next slide. So what constitutes a meeting? Does every meeting where a majority of you together, is that considered a Brown Act meeting? And the answer is no. A Brown Act meeting requires a congregation of a majority of the committee that are in the same location and at the same time to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on something within your subject matter jurisdiction. One major pitfall that we will discuss later are illegal serial meetings, and I will go into ways to kind of avoid running into a violation of that. Next slide. However, before we do the illegal serial meetings, let's run through some of the meeting exceptions. So first, gatherings of or communications among less than a majority of you. So if 2 or 3 of you get together to discuss something within your subject matter jurisdiction, that is generally not a violation of the Brown Act, but we will go into ways that that could run afoul. Qualified ad hoc subcommittees. These are subcommittees created by the original body that are made up of less than a quorum, and they have limited time and tasks. So when these meetings would not be subject to the Brown Act, and you can meet, but they would be dissolved as soon as that task is completed. And so if for some reason the Charter Review Committee decided to form subcommittees, staff can help you evaluate the process for doing so. The Brown Act does have specific statutory exceptions, and these are conferences, community meetings, open meetings of other local legislative bodies, and social and ceremonial events. And in these cases, a majority of you can attend, but you cannot discuss committee business during any of these events. Next slide. So what is an illegal serial meeting? These are any direct or indirect communications involving a majority of the body to discuss, deliberate, or take action on your on a matter that's within your subject matter jurisdiction. The problem is with prohibited serial meetings, it deprives the public of access to participate and observe the legislative body's decision-making. Next slide. So these are the 2 common examples of serial meetings. The first is a daisy chain. This is when committee member A talks to committee member B, talks to committee member C, until a majority have discussed something that's within your subject matter jurisdiction. That would be a violation of the Brown Act. The next example is a hub and spoke. This is when one committee member talks to a majority of the rest of the committee and on the subject matter and creates a serial meeting in this case. Now, we want to be careful. The hub does not need to be a committee member. It could be a member of city staff that talks to multiple committee members. It could be a constituent that may be really relaying information. So you want to be careful when you're speaking and you're hearing maybe the thoughts of other committee members to maybe cut that conversation short, just so that you're not creating an inadvertent Brown Act illegal serial meeting. Next slide. So what about social media? This was a gray area for many, many years. And in 2020, the legislature approved AB 922. And this provided guidance on what's allowed and what's not allowed. So what is social media? Social media includes LinkedIn, Nextdoor, Twitter, Instagram, Meta. There's so many things that I probably can't keep up with all the technology, but anything basically online that you're maybe posting to. This law specifically bars officials from using social media from discussing committee business with other committee members. Next slide. So what can you do? You can provide information to the public. You can solicit information from the public. You can answer questions regarding the subject matter jurisdiction of your committee. Next slide. However, the bright line rule is that you can no longer respond to social media posts of your other committee members. You don't want to comment, you don't want to retweet or share their posts, no emojis and no likes. I do want to highlight that this law is not a majority of you communicating. If two of you respond to, or if one of you responds to another's post or comment, it would be a violation of this law. So you just want to be very careful. You can see someone else's post, just don't respond to it on your committee. Next slide. Okay, so now we're going to go into how meetings are conducted. They must be open and public. This means that there are noticing requirements on the agenda. For special meetings, it's a 24-hour noticing requirement. For regular meetings that we will be scheduling for the committee, that's 72 hours. So we will have the agenda posted 72 hours in advance, if not earlier. And you can only discuss what's posted on the agenda. So there's no substantive discussions on anything that's not on the agenda. For example, if a member of the public brings up another topic, we can't have a full discussion on that, but you can refer to staff or to have that placed on a future agenda for discussion. Next slide. As you just saw, we had public comment, and so public comment is required. We have a public presentations period, but we also allow for public comment on each of the agenda items. The committee is able to provide reasonable time limits for this discussion, but those reasonable time limits should be applied to everyone speaking. We don't arbitrarily put time limits on different people. You are required to have a quorum to have a meeting, and you will need a majority vote to take any action of your committee. Next slide. Oh, you got it. So what are the consequences of a Brown Act violation? So typically, if we're aware of a Brown Act violation, we would try to cure it. We would renotice the hearing. We would retake an action if we needed to. If for some reason we didn't and someone alleges a Brown Act violation, it could be subject to an invalidation action in court, which could subject us to court costs and attorney's fees. There are very extreme situations where personal liability, and that's usually generally if somebody had an ill intent for an intention of violating the Brown Act and prohibiting the public to have access. This is a very rare case. But the big one is on Brown Act violations that you're losing the public's trust. You didn't allow them to have that meaningful access to participate and engage with their local agency. Next slide. So I do want to touch about remote attendance. I know we don't have very many meetings, but I just want to go over these rules. The Brown Act does allow for teleconferencing in. The traditional format of teleconferencing requires that the location be published on the agenda. And then public also needs to have access to that location, and advance notice is required. So that is the traditional teleconferencing. As a result of COVID, AB 2449 was passed, and this allowed remote attendance for just cause and emergency circumstances, and that's defined in the statute. No more than 20% of the meetings of your attendance can be done under this remote attendance. However, there's a correction. It should be maximum of 2. So maximum of 2 of your meetings can be follow under AB 2449. Sorry about that. There are limited justifications, and one example is a family caregiving or a physical medical emergency. If for some reason you may have COVID or you need to take that meeting at home, that would be an emergency circumstance that would allow you for remote attendance. However, in this case, we still need a quorum here. So we can't have less than a quorum physically present for those situations. So we need to be careful about that. Okay, so some practice tips. Don't gather and discuss community business in groups outside of the publicly noticed meeting. Don't direct or CC emails to a majority of this committee. There are exceptions to the Brown Act that allow for you to schedule things together, but it's always just safer to go through staff. And staff, when they're sending communications to you, they typically BCC all of you so that there's no inadvertent reply all where you could inadvertently have a discussion outside of a meeting. You also don't want to discuss items that aren't on the agenda. Refer them to city staff for future discussions. And, oh, sorry, I skipped one. Avoid posting or responding on social media regarding matters before the committee. If it's unclear, always our office is available to you. So ask us early, and we're happy to assist you with any questions if you're uncertain about whether or not something potentially is a Brown Act violation. Okay, rules of procedure. So the City Council operates its meetings under Robert's Rules of Order. Our boards and commissions also follow this requirement. And the purpose of using Robert's Rules of Order is to promote orderly conduct and to provide access for the minority to participate and facilitate discussions in meetings. There are other city standards and practices that also apply, and I'll go into those as well. Next slide. So we've kind of mentioned quorum quite a few times. We need a quorum to meet and to act. A quorum is defined as a majority of the entire membership of the body, and for this 7-membership body, we would need 4 members to be present to hold a meeting. And if only 4 members are present, for any action to be taken, it needs to be done by unanimous vote. So we would need 4 votes to pass any action. Next slide. Okay, so this is the established process that the city utilizes when conducting meetings. And we provide this slide as guidance, for the chair primarily to understand how to take up each item on the agenda. And I can go over them really briefly. The chair reads the agenda description and then asks the staff to present their report or presentation. The committee is then able to ask questions of the city staff or presenters. And then the chair goes out to the public to provide additional public comment on that item. Chair then invites the committee for further discussion or questions, and then a motion, and asks for a motion or a second. And after that motion's taken, then further discussion or deliberations can occur, and then a vote would be taken. So this is just an outline of how each item will be taken during your meetings. Okay, so this will be important for a subsequent item where you're selecting the role of your chair or your vice chair. And your chair is essentially your presiding officer for conducting and facilitating your meetings. Your vice chair would be serving in the absence of the chair. And the chair is typically the spokesperson of the committee. However, the committee is able to develop other procedural rules that it might want to assign to the various members, and that will be done by a majority vote of the committee. Next slide. Okay, so I just have a few slides on the Public Records Act. This followed the Brown Act with the same policy intent. It was enacted in 1968 and modeled under the federal FOIA law. It was incorporated into the California Constitution, and its basic tenet is that public records shall be disclosed to the public upon request. However, there are about 75 exemptions from the Public Records Act. But however, for the most part, most of your work will be subject to the Public Records Act and potentially subject to disclosure. As a legislative body of the city, the work of the committee is subject to the PRA. Next slide. Okay, so public records are any writing containing information relating to the conduct of the public's business, prepared, owned, used, or retained by the state or local agency, regardless of form or characteristics. So let's go through any writing. Writing does not have to be a piece of paper. It can be a text message, it can be an email, it can be a voice recording, your post online. Those all are considered public records. But it's regarding the conduct of the public's business. So those writings are going to be, if it's related to your work as a member of this committee, then those would be considered public records. Please keep in mind that your committee business that you're conducting on your private devices and accounts is subject to the PRA, and such records must be kept and disclosed upon request. For the work of this committee in particular, the retention would be about 2 years for those records. There are penalties that could be assessed against the city, and it's typically court costs and attorney's fees that we would have to fight if someone was trying to get the disclosure of certain records. So here are some practice tips. We have a very short time frame to respond to public records. It's typically 10 days. So we ask that you promptly disclose records if there are asked of you. You want to communicate carefully, especially in emails. If you don't want something to be made public, then don't put it in writing. So you want to be careful about what you put in your emails and communicate with the public, or with city staff, or with regards to this committee. To avoid PRAs on your personal devices, it is best to avoid online communications related to committee business. I know you won't be able to do that entirely, but if you want to limit how many PRAs you're creating, you want to limit how you're communicating.
Okay, so now it's my turn. We get to talk a little bit about this Charter Review Committee and the role and responsibilities. Can I get the next slide, please? So you are an advisory body to the City Council. Your purpose is to recommend to the City Council what, if any, changes should be made to the charter provisions providing for an elected police chief or city clerk. The role and responsibility is, if a recommendation is to maintain an elected police chief and/or city clerk, the committee may provide input on qualifications and eligibilities for those positions. If the recommendation is to amend the charter so that the positions are appointed, the committee should provide input on the appropriate appointing authority, whether the position should be appointed by the City Council or by the city manager. If any change to the charter, the committee would then recommend to council a draft 75-word ballot measure. The role and responsibility also includes for the committee to strive to engage and receive community input in the process and present recommendations to council by November 2023. Next slide, please. So this is a graphic that displays sort of that expected outcomes. Again, studying the positions of police chief and city clerk and to determine whether they should be elected or appointed. If elected, review the qualifications. If appointed, determine who the appointing authority should be, whether it's the council or the city manager. If there are any changes, whether it be the qualifications or the appointing authority, we would then ask the committee to propose a 75-word ballot language. The committee then makes the recommendations for each position to the City Council. And again, one of the expected outcomes is a very robust community engagement. That is our role here as a Charter Review Committee. Next slide. That ends the presentation. Is there any questions on what we've presented on this first item? Member Davis?
Yes, my question is, when we're saying that if it should go to, that the positions would become appointed, we can make recommendations to the appropriate appointing authority. And it is scripted as whom it is. My notice is that the mayor is not there, and I know in some instances the mayor does make an appointment. I just wondered why. Sorry, I wasn't talking into the mic.
So, actually, I'm going to defer to the attorney because I don't know that there's ever been an appointee in this. We're a council manager form of government.
Yeah, our city managers are, it's a strong city manager versus strong mayor type of city where it's, there's most of the big cities typically have a strong mayor, and that's typically the case, but I don't think there's anything prohibiting from considering that for charter purposes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Member Patel?
So my question is this expected outcome on slide number 26, why it cannot be something different? What happens if we have some other approach where, for example, city manager recommends three names, and then city council picks one. So, sorry, what I'm saying is like hybrid approach of like, I mean, the third outcome.
I think that it's up to the committee to recommend what you would like us to look at, and then we as staff would then look at the legal parameters on how to make that work. But the committee is free to suggest alternatives.
Thank you.
So the decision might be independent of police chief and city clerk, right? We can take different decisions. It's not combined as part of what we go as part of the outcome.
Correct. You're considering these questions for each of the individual
Okay,
positions.
thank you.
Any other questions on this item? Any comments from the public on this item? Okay, so we will then move. Next item on the agenda, which is the action to elect a chair and vice chair for the 2023 Charter Review Committee. Can I get the presentation, please? Okay, so all members are eligible to serve as chair or vice chair. The chair and vice chair will be expected to work with staff to ensure the timely completion of the committee's work plan and help guide the committee through its evaluation and deliberative process in a timely, respectful, and inclusive manner with robust community engagement. The vice chair will assume the responsibilities of the chair in the absence of the chair. Next slide, please. The process that we're going to take tonight, members shall first nominate individuals to serve as chair. Nominated individuals shall accept or decline the nomination. We'll have a roll call vote of those who accepted their nomination. Individuals with the highest number of votes shall be named the chair. In the event of a tie, additional ballots shall be conducted until such time as a single individual with a majority vote is selected. This process will be repeated to fill the position of vice chair. Are there any questions on this process? Okay, so at this time, we'll entertain nominations.
I'd like to nominate Christine. I would like to nominate Joyce.
I would like to nominate Jeff.
Can give us a minute. We need to make sure we record it. So Member Houston has nominated Christine. Member Coulterman. And then Member, I can't see that far, Chandra has nominated Member Davis.
Joyce.
Member Davis. And Member Patel has nominated
Jeff.
Mr. Houston, Member Houston. Are there any other nominations? Do the three individuals who have been nominated accept the nominations? Member Coulterman?
Thank you for the nomination, but I think given my teaching responsibilities, I'm concerned about the amount of time needed to coordinate with staff as chair, and I feel like that would be a lot, given that school just started. We've got 2 new members of our department. I'm helping support one of them in teaching biology and chemistry. It's just, I think it would be a little much, and I would prefer to support whoever is chairing the committee.
Okay, so that leaves us with 2 nominees, Member Davis and Member Houston. We'll then take a roll call vote of the committee, and please identify who you wish to vote for.
Sorry, Member Chandra,
Joyce.
Member Patel,
Jeff.
Member Coulterman,
Joyce?
Member Huynh,
I vote for Committee Member Houston.
Member Houston,
I vote for myself.
Member Sini,
I vote for Jeff.
Member Davis,
I'll vote for myself.
Okay, the results are 4-3 with Member Houston serving as chair. Congratulations. At this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Houston, who will then repeat us through the election of a vice chair.
Okay, do we have any nominations for vice chair?
Joyce?
I nominate.
Get Clistic, please.
I nominate Chris.
I would like to nominate Committee Member Patel to be Vice Chair.
I think again, at the time constraint, I think it would be better if I wasn't in a leadership position just in case because of my teaching schedule. I can make the meetings, but it's the outside time with staff that concerns me.
I hear then we have two. Okay. I conduct a roll call vote? I do that, right? Conduct a roll call vote because it's finished, right? Or do we, go ahead, Christine. So Chris and, oh, you're right, it is only one.
No, nominations are
Joyce, I'm sorry.
Member
I had your
Davis
name
and
here,
Member
but I got
Patel.
confused about it.
We have two nominations, Member Patel and Member Davis. Do they both accept?
I accept.
I accept.
Okay, so now we conduct a roll call vote.
All right. Member Chandra?
Joyce?
Member Patel?
Myself.
Member Coulterman?
Patel.
Member Huynh?
Patel.
Member Houston?
Patel.
Member Sini?
Patel.
Member Davis?
Myself.
Congratulations, Patel, you're vice chair. And thank you, Joyce. Next item on the agenda.
Is there any public comment? Any public comment
Okay,
for item 2?
so public comments on the voting for the chair or the vice chair? Our third. So we need one motion to approve the roll call votes for chair and vice chair.
A motion to approve the roll call votes of chair and vice chair. We're going to need a second then.
I second the motion.
Okay,
Okay, so this is just to confirm, the motion was made by Member Coulterman, seconded by Member Huynh to appoint Member Houston as chair and Member Patel as vice chair of the 2023 Charter Review Committee, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Our third item. Oh, we have to do actual vote, of course.
All right, roll call vote. Member Chandra? Oh, this is an aye or nay vote. If you-
Nay.
Member Patel?
Yeah, I approve.
Member Coulterman?
Aye.
Member Huynh?
Aye.
Member Houston?
Aye.
Member Sini?
Aye.
Member Davis?
Aye.
And that motion passes 6-1.
We're on to our third item, which is presentation on prior ballot measures and other historical information related to the positions of police chief and city clerk. Assistant City Manager Cynthia, I haven't heard your last name pronounced.
My last name is Bohorkis.
Bohorkis.
The J is pronounced like an H.
Would you please provide your presentation?
Thank you, I'd be happy to. Can I get the PowerPoint, please? Thank you. The next slide. So just a little bit of background. Cities are either general law cities or charter cities. In California, a general law city has only powers expressly granted or necessarily incident to those expressly granted by the state. So the state defines the powers for the general law cities. Santa Clara, we are a charter city, which means that it governs municipal affairs under locally adopted charters that control powers and structures. Essentially, the charter is our city's constitution. A charter review committee, such as yourselves, is an advisory body to the city council on whether an amendment to the charter should be put forward to the voters at a future election. Next slide, please. Santa Clara establishes a council manager form of government as illustrated here. The councils, there are 3 elected positions that report to the council. The manager, the city clerk, and the police chief. There are 2 assistant police chiefs and an assistant city clerk that report to the city manager, as well as all of the department heads. That's the current structure. Next slide, please. Since 1952, the police chief and the city clerk's positions have been elected by Santa Clara voters pursuant to Section 600 of the city charter. Santa Clara is the only city in the state to elect its police chief. State law requires every city to have a city clerk, but they can be either elected or appointed. Next slide, please. We'll talk a little bit about the qualifications for the positions. For both positions, to qualify for an elected positions, they must be residents and qualified electors of the city at the time of filing. That means they must live in Santa Clara and be eligible to vote in Santa Clara. Next slide. In 2000, Measure I was passed by Santa Clara voters, and it says the candidates for the office of police chief shall meet the minimum eligibility and qualification requirements imposed by state law upon candidates of the office of sheriff. At the time of the filing of date for election, he or she must meet one of the following criteria: an active or an inactive advanced certificate issued by the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training; 2, 1 year of full-time salaried law enforcement experience within the provisions of Section 830.1 or 830.2 of the Penal Code, at least a portion of which shall have been accomplished within 5 years prior to the date of filing and possesses a master's degree from an accredited college or university. Next slide. The third option is 2 years of full-time salaried law enforcement experience within the provisions of Section 830.1 or 830.2 of the Penal Code, at least a portion of which shall have been accomplished within 5 years to the date of filing and possesses a bachelor's degree from an accredited college or university. For 3 years of full-time salaried law enforcement experience within the provisions of Section 830.1 or 830.2 of the Penal Code, at least a portion of which has been accomplished within 5 years prior to the date of filing and possesses an associate's in arts or an associate in science degree or the equivalent from an accredited college. Next slide. The last option is 4 years of full-time salaried law enforcement experience within the provisions of Section 830.1 or 830.2 of the Penal Code, at least a portion of which shall be accomplished within 5 years prior to the date of filing and possesses a high school diploma or the equivalent. All persons holding the office of sheriff on January 1, 1989 shall be deemed to have met qualifications required for candidates seeking election or appointment to the office of sheriff. Next slide, please. So wanted to give you, and it's all contained in your reports, some prior related ballot measures. So in 1952, there was a general election, Measure C, to elect the police chief and city clerk. It passed by a vote of yes, 3,538, and no, 2,420. And again, this amended the charter to provide for the elected police chief and city clerk, as well as establish the election schedule for the positions. In November 1972, again through a general election, there was Measure C related to the city clerk outlining their powers and duties. That measure failed. It was to provide for an appointed city clerk. The votes for that one was yes, 14,057, and no, 14,368. You can see it was very close at that point. The third measure was in June 1994. This was a special election. It was Measure B related to the chief of police. And again, it was to amend the charter such that the police chief would be appointed by the city manager rather than be elected. That measure failed by a vote of yes, 4,370 yes, 10,079 no. And the most recent measure was March 2000. It was again a special election, Measure I, a charter amendment. And this relates to the chief of police requirements that had required candidates for the police chief to meet the minimum requirements imposed by the state law for the office of sheriff. That's the information I just read. And that did pass by a vote of 16,558 with voters saying no in the amount of 2,244. Next slide, please. So any questions on this background information? We just wanted to provide you with some foundational information related to the two positions.
Committee Member Coulterman.
Yeah, just a clarifying question on the flow chart that, so this is on page 1, so slide 33. Where that box says council at the top, it actually, that includes the mayor as being on the council. It's not just the 6 council members. Just wanted to clarify that for everybody because it doesn't say mayor and council.
That's correct. It is mayor and council.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So I have a question on the reporting structure. So we have police chief and assistant chief of police, right? So where does the other officers report into?
The officers report to the assistant police chiefs. They are administrative, so they report through that line of function. However, the police chief is responsible for the, what's the technical? They are responsible for the department, but the actual positions report through the assistant police chiefs.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If there are no other questions, I have one. The assistant chief, the 2 assistant chiefs, those positions are relatively new. Isn't that correct? Within the last few years?
I don't believe so. I think they've been there. There hasn't been 2, but I believe there's been an assistant chief for a number of years.
Okay.
I can double check and confirm when those positions were created.
The assistant city clerk, are we going to discuss in the history the ordinance that was passed a few years ago, which moved duties from the city clerk to the assistant city clerk? Were you planning on discussing that tonight? I know it was in our packet. Because I can save my questions for that time.
So I can answer that question. In 2018, I believe it was 2018, there was a vacancy that occurred due to a resignation. And so the city council chose to make an appointment and delegated the day-to-day operations of the city clerk to an appointed city employee pending an election. They called it an election, and then there was an election held to fill the position of an elected city clerk. And I believe that's the ordinance that you're referring to.
Okay, no more questions? We can move on to the next item?
You need to go out to the public for public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for reminding me. Are there any comments from the public?
We do have one hand raised. Susan Hinton.
Go ahead, Susan.
Yes, you can hear me. So I did look through these materials before the agenda, and there's no history of the city clerk. This all seems to be about the police chief. I noticed that regarding the police chief, when it last came up for election to make the police chief appointed, that was turned down by the public. But I see nothing about the city clerk or moving that from being an elected position in the past to an appointed position. So I'm sort of wondering how it came to be that this is even being considered. It doesn't really strike me that there aren't people available in the city of Santa Clara who could fulfill this job. It seems like there ought to be plenty and that they could run and be elected. Also, just a point that materials that are attached to agenda should include all the presentations. So even though the slide presentation is somewhat redundant with the information that is attached to the agenda, the slide presentation itself should also have been attached to the agenda.
Thank you, Susan. Are there any other comments?
Chair, can I respond to the comments, please?
Sure. Oh,
So-
I'm sorry. Yes, please do.
Okay, so the presentations will be attached to the agendas as post-agenda materials. So that's our normal practices. We do it after the meeting. So we will be posting those. And you'll see a little later when we talk about community outreach strategies, that will be our practice. We will be posting all of the agendas, all of the minutes, all of the presentations will be available online for folks to review. With respect to the city clerk's information, you can see that it's the second item up there where the measure failed. We'd be more than happy to provide the committee with the information on the ordinance and send that out to the committee as a whole so that you have that background on the city clerk. And when the duties assigned, we're assigned and split between the elected city clerk and the appointed city clerk. Happy to do that.
Thank you.
Chair, we do have another hand raised online by Lee. You may speak.
Go ahead, Lee.
Am I wrong that the voting for Pat Nikolai was not on the last election? And also Hagan's Hagag, wasn't it on the last election? And did I have a meltdown and forget?
Can you answer that?
So thank you, Lee, for that question. You'll see that on this slide, this is only related to prior ballot measures. I do know that both positions are up for re-election or consideration in November 2024.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
Doesn't that say it was on the election for 2022? Hello?
Hi, Lee. Are you asking whether they were up for election in 2022?
Weren't they? I really remember voting for them, but maybe I missed something.
Hi, Lee. I'm going to ask the city clerk's office to respond. Thank you.
They were on the ballot for 2020, not 2022.
Okay, but what was the result?
They ran unopposed.
But still, how many votes did they get? I mean, if they.
I don't have that number on me.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any more comments? Okay, does this item require a motion or a vote?
No, it's just an informational item.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is discussion and action on proposed community engagement strategies and other resources for the 2023 Charter Review Committee. Assistant City Manager Cynthia Boorquez, would you please provide your presentation?
Thank you, Chair. Can I have the next slide, please? Can I get the next slide, please? Okay, so some background. Again, the committee is to present your recommendations to the City Council on November 7th, to be specific. The process is really around providing Santa Clarans the opportunity to express your views and their views, and for the committee to recommend changes, if any, based on that input. The city has a variety of tools that are used to engage the community. The goal is to provide an open forum for respectful, inclusive dialogue, the presentation of best practices and thoughtful deliberation of varying perspectives prior to ultimately making your recommendations to the City Council. Next slide. Proposed outreach strategies. We are proposing to have a set meeting schedule, and that will be discussed on the next item, readily available to the public. We think it's very important for the public to know when to be able to promote the dates of the meetings so that we encourage people to attend to those meetings. That is a very important component of this process. We continue to hold hybrid meetings in facilities that are accessible to the community and held at convenient times. So for this meeting and the next meeting, we will be here in City Hall. And then for the remainder of the meetings, we will be holding those meetings at Central Park Library. We've created a dedicated webpage with relevant community-related resources, so we will be posting agendas, the reports, the minutes, schedule of the committee, and any other relevant information that this committee would like us to post. We're proposing 2 public hearings with sufficient time in between to allow for outreach with the flexibility to hold 1 additional hearing if need be. Our recommendation is that public presentations be limited to 2 minutes so that you can maximize the number of individuals who can provide testimony before you. Next slide, please. We will be continuing to provide you with an overview of historical and best practice and alternative model information, including presentations from the Santa Clara Police Chief and the City Clerk, as well as outside experts who will talk about appointed positions. We plan to use the city's communications channels, including our survey tools, should the committee wish to conduct a survey, and our social media. We will be establishing a dedicated email for the committee to receive communications from the public. As staff, we will respond to the inquiries and then forward any communications to the committee for your awareness and action if need be. Next slide. Any research inquiries from the committee that we receive, we will respond to and provide the information and then post that information on the committee webpage so that, again, it is available to the public. And just as an FYI, for members of the public, if you wish to submit written comment into the record for an item on the agenda, the deadline is noon the day of the meeting. So we will be providing you as post-agenda material. Actually, did they receive it already? You should have received already the public comment that was received for today's meeting, as well as any e-comments that were provided. I believe there was 2. Next slide, please. So we wanted to provide you with we've heard from a number of you when we were conducting your oath of office, some questions. And so we wanted to just post these out here for you so you can understand sort of what we're hearing and the information that we will bring back to you at a future meeting. The first one is, how would a change from elected to appointed positions change current operations? What steps would be needed to make a change in the timeline for doing so? How do Santa Clara positions compare with surrounding agencies in our county? Is the trend statewide to move towards elected or towards appointed positions, and what's driving those changes? And if the positions remain elected, what would be the process to amend the qualifications or eligibility requirements if you so wish to do so? Next slide, please. So that completes the presentation, available to answer any questions, or would love to get input from the committee if there's additional research or questions that the committee would like staff to answer for the next meeting.
Do any committee members have questions?
Yeah, I do have questions. So I would like to ask city to do the research on what are all the other places within the California where we have elected chiefs, also elected sheriffs also. So that would be helpful actually. And in case any percentage of the wins, what they have. Thank you.
Coulterman, committee member Coulterman?
I would like to know for appointed, since we are the only city with an elected chief and we have a residency requirement, my question is, all the other cities that have appointed chiefs, is there also a residency requirement, or that people move into that jurisdiction after they're appointed or not?
Daniel, I've never pronounced your last name. Would you please pronounce it for me?
Huynh.
Huynh?
Yes.
Committee member Huynh?
Yes, as I recall staff saying that we will bring in experts when presenting slides around slide 45, 46. Do we know who these experts are and their credentials, like what institution, university they are? Are they professors, historians, etc.?
Thank you. Any more questions? I have a couple questions. I understand at least a few years ago, Morgan Hill has an elected city clerk similar to ours. And their only responsibility, as I'm aware, is overseeing the elections. So that might be a good example that we could, I'd just like to know more about them and how, I think I had a question. I think that's all. Committee member Coulterman?
I have one more. So I have been here since '89, living in the city. So I remember having a full-time city clerk, elected city clerk, who was in the office. And then since we went to halftime, I just want to know specifically what are the duties now for someone who is a part-time city clerk, and what duties shifted to, specifically shifted to staff in the city clerk's office.
Any other questions? Cynthia, on slide number 47, sample committee research questions, do you need us to direct you to do this, or if we say nothing, will you go ahead and do it, or?
No, we will take the questions. We've noted down the questions from the committee and we'll respond.
I have a question.
If there are, I'm sorry. Oh,
yeah. Can we have a sample questions here where it would highlight the money involved as part of the change from elected to appointed? What would it cost for the city? Because some said 600K, 500K. So let's come with that figure and say that, no, have that as part of sample question, please. That's my recommendation.
Can I ask a question? So is it the cost of the position or their election process as well? Can you just, which cost are you looking for?
The cost of, the cost of the change, since it is right now as an elected appointment, right? and elected as the voters, right? It's going to, if the 600K is what I heard, that it would cost if you are going to move from elected to the appointed.
Okay, we'll do a one-time and an ongoing cost for you.
And can I have that in the sample questions, please? When we are asking the research. Thank you.
And Cynthia, what input do you need from us to use the city communication channels like the survey?
So we're looking for feedback from you. If that's something that you would like to do, we can put that on our work plan to come back and propose a survey question for you or get input from the committee on what kind of survey questions you would like. We do have a service that we can put on the city's website where we can collect information and work with the committee on an appropriate survey and question.
So at the end of this item, we are going to have a roll call?
At the end of this item, we'd like to have a motion to approve the proposed outreach strategies and any additional strategies that you would like us to consider.
Okay, that's perfect. And okay. So
Committee Member Colterman has a question.
My question is, in gathering online survey information, are there steps that can be taken to determine, are the people responding citizens or who actually live in Santa Clara? I want to hear from the people who live here who'd be affected, not outside of City of Santa Clara, in terms of an online survey. Is there any, there may be no way to do that, other than a question, are you a resident of the City of Santa Clara?
I don't know the answer to that, but I'll ask our comms teams to see if there's any way to restrict it. I'm not sure that there is, but I can ask.
thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee? Are there any comments from the public? Any comments online? And if there are no more committee member, oh, yes, Chandra, please, Committee Member Chandra.
Yeah, Chairperson, in the recent, the City Council has been in the news for certain things. So what is the fallout of the court decisions which are going to come based on the City Council? I've heard certain things. I think there have been some active cases going on. So will it have impact on this committee or not?
And so your question was active cases. Can you give an example of, I'm not sure what you mean by active cases.
I heard one of the City Council were indicted, right? So it was in there's one for Anthony Baker, some indiction happened, or I'm not sure. Can you please let me know, like in regards to that? I just wanted to understand whether any legal implications.
I mean, for those purposes of those outstanding issues, I don't think it implicates anything for the way your responsibility under the charter review and what you're reviewing. I think that's a completely separate issue.
That answers your question? Okay, good. Are there any other questions from the committee? Okay, so we need a motion and a second for this item to you phrased it very well. Can you say that again, please?
To approve the proposed outreach strategies and any, with the addition of the questions from the committee and any other direction that you would like us to pursue.
I make a motion to approve the suggested outreach questions as, in addition to the questions that the committee just provided to staff.
Thank you, Committee Member Colterman. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Thank you.
As for clarification, does that include the online survey?
Yes, that includes the online survey.
Thank you.
Okay. Roll call, right?
Member Chandra?
Aye.
Member Patel?
Aye.
Member Coulterman? Member
Aye.
Quinn?
Aye.
Member Houston?
Aye.
Member Sini?
Aye.
Member Davis?
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0.
Okay, that was unanimous. The next item to be discussed is an action on the meeting schedule for the 2023 Charter Review Committee. Assistant City Manager Cynthia Boorquez, would you please provide your presentation?
Excellent. I'd be happy to. Can I have the next slide, please? So we have on this screen a number of meetings between now and November. The first, obviously, is tonight at 7 o'clock. The next one would be a public hearing here in the chambers on August 24th, also at 7 o'clock. A second public hearing at Central Park Library on September 14th. The committee meeting to draft your initial recommendations on September 21st. A second meeting to finalize the committee's recommendations currently scheduled on October 5th. We would look to issue the staff report to transmit your recommendations to the City Council on either Thursday, November 2nd or Friday the 3rd. And then present to Council on November 7th with a time to be determined but during the regular Council meeting. Next slide, please. We did have a request to move the October 5th meeting to October 12th, so we'd ask the Council to consider that. We also would like to know whether the 7 p.m. start time for these meetings work for you, or should the committee consider an earlier start to accommodate more testimony at the public hearings so that you can get as many folks in as possible? And is there a need for any other schedule adjustments? And just to answer one question that we did get was, the full committee does not need to attend the presentation to council. However, it is an opportunity for the council to thank the committee for your service, and so we would encourage and love to have everybody present for that presentation. So that concludes my presentation, and look for the council committee's direction.
Thank you, Cynthia. Are there any questions from the committee? Committee Member Coulterman?
Yes, so I'm the one who requested if we could move the October 5th date because my district, San Jose Unified, the entire district's on vacation that whole week. So that's been planned for a long time, and I have many family members coming here. And so I can't commit to being here any night that week. Any night the following week, so Thursday, October 12th is consistent with staying with Thursdays, but any other night would also work. So I'd appreciate the committee considering making that change so I can attend.
Committee Member Sine?
I would not be able to make the 12th.
Any other questions from the committee?
I just have a
Can
comment.
I?
I'm sorry. We should finish that conversation.
I have a comment. I am okay with moving it on the 12th for similar reasons. I am also, my district is also off on that first week, and I have some plans that would have me out of the state.
Can we suggest any other date, October 10th or 9th?
Chandra, are you suggesting that we do the 10th or the 9th? Okay. Committee Member Coulterman, were you saying the Santa Clara Unified School District has that whole week off? No, San Jose. San Jose, okay, because my wife is in Santa Clara. Okay, and you're also in San Jose then, right? And that's when you have that week off also, right?
Right, but I am not in San Jose. I'm at a charter school that
Oh,
also
okay.
has that week off.
Okay, and you guys have that week off?
Yeah, so, and then follow-up, what's coming up next is another date was proposed of that week, and I do believe she said that you could be available other days of the week of the following week, correct. And I believe I can do that as well.
Do the 10th.
Chair?
So the 9th is,
Can I just
Yeah.
say, that's a city holiday, so we're closed. And then the 10th is a city council meeting date. So neither the Monday nor Tuesday will be available of that week.
we can't do the 9th or the 10th.
Cannot do the 9th or the 10th.
Any other suggestions? Wednesday, the 11th? I see a lot of nods, everybody nodding their head for Wednesday, the 11th? Okay. So we're moving October 5th to Wednesday, the 11th. And that was the only change that I heard? Okay.
If we can get feedback on the start time, that would be helpful as well. Does the 6 or the 7?
I think if tonight was nice because we could have dinner at 6 and then start the meeting at 7. With those of us who are working, if we start at 6, and we're actually, I think it's going to make it hard to be able to eat before that, coming from work.
Yeah, I agree with Calderman. It's better to start at 7 because most of them are working. And definitely it would be hard for us to come at 6 o'clock. So 7 is perfect time.
Patel, did you have a question?
No, I'm okay with 7.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Okay, so it sounds like we stay at 7. And dinner at 7.
We'll need a motion for it.
Okay,
You set the count.
Before the motion, just check for public comment.
okay. And the motion will be for the whole item or just the change of October 5th meeting?
To accept the calendar, the schedule with the adjustments
Okay.
and the 7 o'clock start time.
Okay, there's no more comments from committee members. Are there any comments from the public? Any comments online?
Susan Hinton?
Go ahead, Susan.
Yes, I'm just wondering how the survey fits into the timing. An expected start date and an expected final date, and then when will the results be published?
Cynthia, do you want to respond to that?
Sure, we can look at doing the survey following the first public hearing and then being able to report back at that second public hearing. Or if we can't get the survey's information back, we could definitely do it when the committee meets on the 21st. It's up to the committee of how long you want to have the survey open.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? Okay. Any more committee member comments?
That's a good question. Thank you.
I'm sorry, committee member Chandra, go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you, Susan, for a good question. I think your suggestion for public hearing, first public hearing to start the survey is a good idea. But I think it would definitely require minimum 4 to 6 weeks. I meant to say, get the survey to be done. So I would propose not the second public hearing where we come with the results, probably maybe the committee meeting third to finalize the committee recommendations, or probably September 21st would be an ideal situation.
So if we were to do that, we would then look to open a survey following the public hearing. I would like to get a little bit direction on what you'd like us to survey on, right? What would the survey question be? And then, since we just moved it to the 11th, what I just heard you say is you would like us to come back with the results of the survey on the 11th so that you can use that to inform your final recommendations. Is that correct?
Yes, October 11th or September 21st.
Is that sufficient time?
You had asked for 4 to 6 weeks, so the October date would actually give you more of the 4 to 6 weeks. the four, because we won't get the survey up until after that first hearing. And so 4 weeks would take you to the September 21st. The 6 weeks would probably take you to the October date. It's the discretion of the committee. However whatever you'd like to give direction to staff.
So I leave it to others to comment on. So either dates are fine for me because, yeah, minimum 4 weeks of the time, if you tend to give to the survey, that would be great. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions on this? I guess waiting until the public hearing gives us an opportunity so that more people are aware of the survey, because is there a reason we just couldn't do it as soon as possible instead of waiting for that public hearing?
I'd want to talk to staff to see how soon we can get it up. I was kind of hesitating on the 4 to 6 weeks as well. I don't know what else we have on our website, and so I'd need to check the availability and the length. So if the direction can be to try and get the best 4 to 6 week period, that would be helpful to give us some flexibility to figure out what we can work out on our website.
Okay, I like that. Is everybody happy with that? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that.
So now we're on to a motion. Okay. So and the motion is to approve the meeting schedule as revised and the, what would you call that, outreach? The survey, or input, it was public input.
We're looking for an approval for the schedule, and then for direction on a survey that should be held open for 4 to 6 weeks, based on the availability of the city's website, and then direction on what the committee would like us to survey on.
As well as the 7 p.m. meeting
As well
time.
as the 7 p.m. meeting, and the change of the date from the 5th to the 11th.
Will that require multiple motions?
You could do
Just one, okay.
it all in one.
And then I guess also approve the webpage. I don't think we really talked about that, but I read it. I'm okay with that.
Correct. Any feedback on any of the components of the community engagement strategy?
Okay, I need a motion on what Cynthia just said.
I'm sorry, the community engagement was on the website would have been part of the last agenda item. This is just the meeting schedule.
Okay, the only thing I'm not clear on is how to put in to the motion the question we're going to ask. So I'd actually like to separate that and just get through the schedule first and the survey. Okay, so I make a motion to accept the committee schedule as published. This is on slide 50. So tonight's meeting, then Thursday, August 24th, Thursday, September 14th, Thursday, September 21st, Wednesday, October 11th, Thursday, November 2nd, or Friday, November 3rd, time to be determined, a Tuesday, November 7th, time to be determined. All of the other meetings will start at 7 p.m. with a survey to be conducted through the city's website, which will open after public hearing number 1, which is on Thursday, October 24th, and end on Thursday, September 21st, or 4 to 6 weeks, or on Wednesday, October 11th. Okay, which one? Well, which end date do you want?
It's the start date that, if you can just give us the
Okay.
survey to be held open for 4 to 6 weeks with the start date to be determined by staff.
Okay, so let me modify what I said. The schedule plus survey to open after public hearing number 1 on August 24th to last for 4 to 6 weeks, conducted through the city website.
Is that what you were asking for, or were you asking that you guys decide when you started? Because
So what I was hearing from the committee was there was a desire to start sooner if we could. right? And so what I was suggesting is, instead of saying, starting with the public hearing, just allowing us to do the survey within and keep it open with 4 to 6 weeks, and determine what's the best 4 to 6 weeks within this time period.
All right, so let's keep the motion with the schedule and say a survey to last from 4 to 6 weeks, to be started when city staff is ready, has the website ready, to conduct that survey when they think it's best to start.
Can I, one humble request. So make sure the bucketed dates for 14th and 21st are be part of that particular survey, because you have public hearing and they will have a chance to, know that survey is still active. Thank you.
Yeah, so we need a second?
I second it.
Very good. Roll call, please, City Clerk.
Member Chandra?
Aye.
Member Patel?
Aye.
Member Coulterman?
Aye.
Member Quinn?
Aye.
Member Houston?
Aye.
Member Sini?
Aye.
Member Davis?
Aye.
And so now we'd be looking for direction from the committee on the substance of the survey.
I have a question to city attorney. So once the finalization of the survey questions, right? Are we eligible to forward it to the public within the Santa Clara or not?
For the results of the survey?
No. I mean, say to let them know that this is a survey or the web page or anything information.
Yeah, I mean, we have our own comms team, and I think they would be able to send it out to the public as they do with normal city communications. So yeah, it could be part of that.
So if we tend to do, is it a kind of we are trying to cross a line, or I just wanted to understand. So example, if you wanted to also put it in social media,
Well, from a Brown Act perspective,
Yeah.
if you wanted to share it,
Yeah.
that wouldn't be an issue. You would be able to share it across your social media as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Other committee member Coulterman?
I have a question. Can the survey also be provided on paper, like to the senior center? I recall when I was on the 2019 Charter Review Committee, we also would provide it on paper for those who did not have internet access. And that may be a small number of people, but I don't want to miss comments from anyone.
Any other questions from the committee?
We will make limited copies available at the various facilities to ensure that we can get that input.
So we have 14 days until our first public hearing. Are you anticipating you might be able to have it ready by then?
We're looking from you for direction on what you would like to include in the survey. Generally, it's very limited number of questions on the city website. So, is there a particular question that you would like us to ask in that survey? Do you want us to simply do the survey of the question of should the positions be elected or appointed? Should there be a change? Should we consider a charter change, or should the charter just remain the same? I'm looking for direction from the committee as to what you would like us to survey on.
Committee member Coulterman?
Yeah, I think to the questions that are short and sweet and to the point, should the city consider a charter change to make the position of police chief appointed? Yes or no? Should the city consider a charter change to make the position of city clerk appointed? Yes or no? And then if the position would change to be appointed, should the appointment be made by the mayor and council or by the city manager? And ask that question for both. That basically gets at the crux of what we're, of what our committee's work is.
And then I also think, I agree, I also think that there should be room for people who choose to give an explanation, such as the people who came to speak tonight. They had their reasons as to supporting, well, I don't think there was an opposing point of view, so it seemed to be unanimous tonight. In the comments that were made, I think people should be able to write that out if they'd like to do that too.
Any other comments from the committee?
And the question should include the cost aspect also. Are we going to, like, how much is city, in case if you are going to have this change, this is a cost. Do you think city can absorb, or, what do you feel about it? Yes or no?
I'd like to think that that could be covered in their comments, just like tonight. Unless we have a breakdown exactly of what it is, I don't know that people would be operating with pure information, correct information.
Thank you, Member Davis. Yeah, at this point, we would not have that information on what the eventual costs will be. We can obviously talk about what an election costs, but even that is subject to when the election occurs, how many other measures are going forward at the same time, so there's a lot of variables. So I'd be a little reluctant to try and survey on that particular issue in that way.
Any other questions or comments?
I think probably it may be a good idea to include some background information that we are the only city who has election versus appointed positions and all that. So that way, because there are so many new voters maybe in the city, for their benefit, we need to include that details.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Davis?
I'm just wondering, is that information already posted? Any history like you gave us here? Because is this information going to be posted for people to see? Sorry, I'm losing my voice.
So if the question is, are the PowerPoint presentations going to be posted? The answer is yes. And we created the webpage that was in your packet, and so that will be posted as well. So there is some background information there as well. And then what we are looking for is direction from you authorizing staff to go ahead and draft the survey questions based on the feedback that we received tonight.
Okay, so we need a motion.
Chair Houston, just because we kind of went back to the prior item to discuss the survey, can we just go out to the community and see if they have any public comment, just because we kind of moved back to the prior agenda report?
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? No? Are there questions or comments from the public? So, public online?
Lee?
Go ahead, please.
So my question didn't get answered in the first time I asked it. So the previous election in 2022, when we had the city clerk and police chief, they were ran unopposed. It was the answer. But what was the result? So most times when it's unopposed, there's no response. So what was the response for the election?
So
Thank you.
the election for the city clerk and chief of police was done in November 2020, not 2022. And in
Okay, then that, I'm just asking what I
so,
remember.
yeah, okay, so the city clerk, for 2020, the city clerk received 33,548 votes, and the chief of police received 33,880 votes.
So they ran unopposed, but nobody came forward to say that was not a good, they didn't like that. But, and that was pretty much all, if I look at it, that was all of the votes was cast for most of the election. Thank you.
Chair Houston, can I just clarify that as part of the survey, you do want us to state that we are the only city with an elected police chief. Is that correct? Is that what I thought I heard?
Yes.
Thank you. So if that could be included in whatever motion is made, that would be great.
Yeah, and also like, I mean, we can reference all the materials we have. We can link it from the survey, right? So when they have like little background or paragraph, for further information, click here or something, so they have full material access before they begin the survey. So I think like probably we should highly encourage them to review all the materials prior to their votes.
I'd like to add on the measures what from the slide where we had the previous results, right? Uh, those also as part of the percentile, what's the difference as the voters have done. So I would say the slide 40. So that is critical part of them letting know that this was historically what has happened, and this is where it stands now. This information also will be helpful. Thank you.
Would it be appropriate, since we are going to be linking all of the materials, just to provide a link to the reference materials, or is there a different direction?
I think all.
Member Patel, what was it, your comment? You're saying that the link would be appropriate?
Yeah, link should be fine, but I think like we should have the language that we are encouraging them to review all the materials prior to begin their survey and all that, so that way it's obvious.
I just want to clarify, because there was a little bit of a distinction between the two directions. One was to provide all the material, a link to all the materials, and then I heard the second member say specifically just the chart. So I just want to be clear on what I'm providing, and I believe it's a link to all of the materials.
Let me reinstate my statement. So when we are asking a question that is it required to change the current elective process of police chief, then you should give the historical data referencing June 1994 special election. What was the result? The 70% was a failure. So 70% of the people have disapproved. So we have to mention that and related to those questions. Thank you.
I think like, I mean, this slide is part of all the materials, so I think it will be included.
I agree. This slide is part of all the materials, so they just provide the links to the materials. Because otherwise, we are making a decision about what's most important in all of those materials for people to see. We're picking out just one small slide, and I think people should be able to look through all of it and decide for themselves what is the most important material that has bearing on their decision, as well as encourage people to come to the hearings.
Yes, can we motion this?
Yes, please.
Okay, can I say something? I think this is for the public, right, as part of the hearing, and this crucial bit is very important for the people to know because it has a historical kind of a purpose, and it specifically says what we are going to recommend as to the city council, and this 4 articulate clearly to what we recommend a decision to the city council, and this has to be specific. I would rather put as specific part of the questionnaire rather than getting lost in translation, because you tend to give a bunch of 30, 40 pages and it get lost in translation. So I would like to be having this specific information, if so, because from the historical from 1952 to 2000, these are very critical. Thank you.
I think like, I mean, as part of transparency and all that, I think we should not be picking anything from our residents. I think like they can go through the whole thing and they can interpret all this presentation by themselves. I think it's obvious here. And I think I feel like, I mean, with all the transparency, we should have everything available to the public.
Again, same thing, right? So some people might have access to the question, some people might not have access to the material, but making them specific to the questions, that will make a little bit easier for them. So people might not be interested in getting into too much of information, or if you are going to print out this and send this information to senior citizens, and then you have to give those specific 30 to 40 pages to each and everything, which would be an overhead. That's my thought process. Thank you.
I think what committee members Patel and Coulterman said resonate with me in that we need to be careful that we're not giving them consolidating information that we think is going to influence how they answer the survey. And if we just have the survey just have questions, and then at the beginning of the survey, we explain where this material can be found, because it can be found very easily, and encourage them to review all the material that's available so that they make very informed answers on the survey that aren't influenced by us deciding what information is more important. So that's my feelings on the matter. If there are no other comments, can we have a motion?
Excuse me. Did you get the clarity that you needed in terms of the question you asked at the start?
So the clarity I needed was whether or not it was going to be all the materials or a select materials, and I think that's going to depend on the motion that comes forward. Is that the question that you're referring to? Thank you.
We're ready for a motion.
I motion to approve, including all the materials for all the City of Santa Clara residents to review prior to begin the survey.
Do you need more in that motion, or are we going to do more than one motion?
If I can just get clarification, does that include the questions that were identified by?
Yes.
Thank you. By Member Coulterman?
As well as,
So as I read the questions, should this council consider a charter change to the police chief to change it from elected to appointed, yes or no? Should the city council consider a charter change to the city clerk's position to make it from elected to appointed, yes or no? If a change is suggested to make it appointed, should it be appointed by the mayor and council or the city manager? And if I could just clarify, when I say council, I do mean mayor and council, so I'll make a better choice of saying mayor and council, but that is the collective definition of when I say it. And then providing an explanation, an open-ended question for the reasons why, and then starting it with some background of the purpose of the survey, and then referencing that the materials are available and giving them the website included before they take the survey. That's how I understand it.
Yes.
I'll second.
Roll call?
Member Chandra?
Aye.
Member Patel?
Aye.
Member Coulterman?
Aye.
Member Quinn?
Aye.
Member Houston?
Aye.
Member Sini?
Aye.
Member Davis?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Our final agenda item is a city staff report. Does staff have a verbal report?
Thank you. Just want to thank everybody for your service, for coming out tonight, for engaging in this process. It's a very important process. As we said earlier, the charter is basically our constitution. So we take changes to any of this change very seriously and really encourage and thank you for your service and getting people out to the meetings. We will be having public hearings, as noted in the calendar, so please let people know about the public hearings, encourage them to come. We'd love to have this council chambers filled with residents who wish to express their civic participation in the process, and thank you again for your service. That's it.
Our meeting is now coming to an end. I want to thank everyone for coming to tonight's meeting. Our next meeting of the committee will be a public hearing on Thursday, August 24th, 2023 at 7 p.m. On behalf of the committee, I would encourage members of the public to attend that hearing to share their views and learn more about the options under consideration. Committee members, do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting to the next meeting of Thursday, August 24th, 2023 at 7 p.m.?
Motion to adjourn.
I second.
Motion by Coulterman and a second by Nguyen. If you have If we have no objection to this motion, I will now adjourn this meeting at 8:51 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, city staff, for all of your support.